as you speak, I'm curious about how you as a libertarian feel that the winner in Iowa and a possible leader of your party in the fall in the presidential election is a man who openly identifies himself, defines himself as, quote, a Christian leader. I'm speaking, of course, of Michael Huckabee, who, as you know, wears his religion on his sleeve, talks openly about it, doesn't proselytize politically for it, but he is a man who has identified himself as a Christian leader. Does that make you uncomfortable, given the fact that most libertarians I know are disturbed about any entanglement between the government and religion?
Well, it bothers me to a degree. I happen to be a believer. I'm a Christian, and I do write about it, but I specifically say I don't carry my religion on my sleeve. Sometimes I had been annoyed about the prayer breakfast in Washington. I never attended the prayer breakfast in Washington, although I am a believer. I just thought that was more publicity, and, you know, the Bible does teach us that we should say our prayers in a closed room and not flaunt it, and not to pretend you're holier than others. So I've approached it that way, and I haven't accused anybody of doing that, but it is, when it's overly used, it does annoy me. I mean, the idea of a theocracy very much annoys me.
Do you see Michael Huckabee in that direction?
I don't. He hasn't said anything specifically that I would say we got to defeat Mike Huckabee because I think he's a theocrat. I haven't said that, but I think that there are a lot of people who may interpret it that way.
And are you nervous?
I'm nervous about the way our country is going because they don't understand the First Amendment, you know, because I'm a strong defender of the First Amendment, and that says the Congress shall write no laws, and that's what I think is the most important thing. I sometimes even worry about how they've, I don't like the idea that Mitt Romney might lose, you know, because of his religious beliefs. And if you understand the First Amendment, we shouldn't even be asking him what his religious belief is. So I'm sympathetic with that, and I don't like that, the way he's been treated, or at least subtly behind the scenes, and how people might react to that. Because with the First Amendment, it says we're not supposed to be dealing in that, and that shouldn't and never be a litmus test for being elected.
And the Constitution, and you believe in the Constitution, says that there can be no religious test for office, right? Doesn't some of the things that Mike Huckabee is saying get close to an implied religious test?
I think for some of the supporters might be doing that, and I think they have a right to know what your religion is, but that shouldn't be a test. And I think for some individuals it becomes a test, but I don't think we've quite gotten to the point where we have to make a public statement of what our religious beliefs are, or the rejection of our religious beliefs. I think the most important thing is to make sure they understand the First Amendment.
You know, you're against the war that your party cheered. You're scared of this big debt building up under your party's leadership. You oppose the big spending that President Bush has encouraged on the drug industry and education. Wall Street thinks you're a crank for your beliefs. Why do you stay in the Republican Party?
Well, I've been elected as a Republican for 10 times, and Republicans have a platform and had a better platform in the past. They expressed these views. But in fact, George Bush, if you remember, ran on foreign policy not too far from what I'm talking about. So it's not like I'm completely a stranger to the Republican ideas of, you know, they talked about balanced budgets and limited government, and they're strict constitutionalists. And I think the ones who are in charge right now have left the Republican Party in the platform, which makes it more difficult because people in the party, the hardcore base, which unfortunately for the Republicans is getting smaller, but they're loyal to the leader, and they're loyal to maintaining power. They're not loyal to a principle or the Constitution and saying doing what is right. You know, they can't reverse their trend. You know, if we're in a bad situation in Iraq, no, we can't be disloyal. And so they're not objective enough. So, but I think I can be a good Republican and fight for these ideals because they have been in the Republican Party in the past, and the question is will these ideas be revived once again in the Republican Party, or will people like myself be excluded? There's indeed a lot of people would like to exclude me from the Republican Party, but their party is awful small. Why would they want to exclude us if we want to work within the Republican Party?
Because it seems hard to reconcile the presence of a Libertarian Party, and you've got a pretty substantial guerrilla army out there in of Libertarians, with a government, with a party of big business, a party of war, a party of God. That seems hard for someone outside to reconcile.
Yeah, it is, and yet I imagine you could find some inconsistency with all the parties. I'm sure there's some of those. The idea that liberal Democrats are supposed to protect our civil liberties and keep us out of war, they don't do a very good job either. So when you get up on the leadership ladder, it seems like policies aren't a whole lot different. Foreign policy never changed. Domestic fiscal policy, the welfare entitlement system never changes. Monetary policy won't even be discussed. And that's both parties. And the vehicle that you use, I think, is not as relevant as the message, and that has been what has driven me, is the fact that we need to change course in this country. I highly respect the Constitution, but I'm not even overly rigid about the Constitution. There's a vehicle for changing it. I just am overly rigid. Don't ignore it. Don't go to war without declaring it. And listen to the Fourth Amendment. Listen to what it says about the privacy rights of the American people.
How do we get these ideas into the public debate, given the tendency of the big media to want to narrow the discussion? I mean, they say that in Iowa, in these debates, in New Hampshire, they just want to try to get the conversation down so it can be more intimate among the real candidates.
Yeah, well, you have to just go where you can, and like I said, there is more competition. We might have Fox, which is tied deeply to the war, more so than, say, a Wolf Blitzer. Wolf Blitzer gives me a fair shake. He interviews me, and I think he's a very decent journalist. So I think that we just have to use the tools that we have, and I try not to concentrate on those brickbats that they're throwing at me. I just found I'll just go around it and do my best to get around it. I still think there's enough freedom in this country, even though it's shrinking all the time, where we can get our message out. And I see the young people. I am so enthused about the young people who are excited about these views and what they see on YouTube and the internet. And they're not coming here because they're asking for student loans. They come to me and they're excited because I tell them that, you're not going to get a thing out of Social Security. All you're going to do is pay for 50 years. The whole thing is broke. I said, I have an idea and a way we can get you out of it. You can take care of yourself once again. And they love these ideas.
It's views like that cause some people. I pulled some stories from the internet this morning. I mean, some critics think you're a hero to liberals because you're against the war and you constantly are on a charge against George W. Bush. And they say,
but they don't like these views.
No, they don't. In fact, there's some pieces I've been reading this morning that accuse you of illiberal sentiments on race, Israel, and other topics. They say that you've demeaned blacks by some of your references to the Civil War and to slavery, and that you are always attacking the Jewish lobby, the Israeli lobby.
Oh, I think that's completely wrong. And libertarianism is the enemy of all racism, because racism is a collectivist idea. It's that you put people in categories. You say, well, blacks belong here and whites here and women here. And we don't see people in forms or gays. You don't have rights because you're gays or women or minority. You have rights because you're an individual. So we see people as strictly as individuals, and we get these individuals in a natural way. So it's exactly opposite of all collectivism, and it's absolutely anti-racism because we don't see it in those terms.